This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello and welcome into another 3-Ma. I am John Kurtz, joined as always by Derek Young from K-State Online and Cole Manbeck, former beat writer for the Manhattan Mercury. And today we are talking about another K-State victory as the Wildcats get it done, albeit barely, at home, 70-66 over Oklahoma State, a game in which K-State trailed much of the evening but found a way, put the pressure on the Cowboys in the end, and they did crack. And that means you should raise a glass, and it should be some Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon or some 360 vodka in said glass. Of course, from our friends at Holiday Distillery, we appreciate all of their support of the pod. Great K-State folks, so I'm sure we're pumped about another victory and a 4-1 start to Big 12 play, just like we were. So if you're a bourbon guy or gal, make sure and get your Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon, or you can check out their 360 vodka as well. Had it the whole way, not a single doubt, right? I know Cole and I were sitting next to each other during the game. We never doubted for 1 second. We were very calm, cool, and collected, and never had any bit of frustration at all as K-State rolls to another win. No, it's actually quite the opposite of that. In fact, there are eyewitnesses who could attest to that. But hey, they found a way again, and that was a game that you really couldn't lose, especially with the week that you have coming up with a couple of really tough road games and the stretch that you have coming up, which is going to be a pretty familiar refrain for anybody in the Big 12 at any point in time. But that was a type of game that you really couldn't afford to lose. Didn't want to pick up a first really bad-looking loss on the season, and K-State just found a way to make enough plays and kind of let Oklahoma State wilt a bit when the pressure started to get to them and the environment started to get to them late.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it wasn't the most impressive win that we've seen or the most impressive performance that we've seen from Kansas State. But, you know, when you pick up a win that you can't afford to let slip through your fingers in the Big 12, I'm probably never going to be that critical about it. And especially because this team's just learning different ways to win. And I think I think there's a great skill about that. I think there's a great, I think there's something to be said about teams that are able to do that. Even Jerome Tang said afterwards, right? He said, we got to be honest with ourselves. We look at our roster. We're not a team that's going to light it up for 80 or 90 points on most nights. This is kind of the way we have to win. And to be able to do it now as consistently as they have been, and let's be honest, consistency was part of the problem for this team for much of the year, basically all throughout non-conference. And maybe those lessons learned are now bearing out in better performances and finding ways to win. So, yeah, I'm not going to probably poo-poo any Big 12 win much this year. You get one, you love it, and you move on to the next and try to grab the other. What I will say is this team is so good late in games. We know it. The 10-0 in overtime, I think, under Jerome Tang's like 11-4 in games decided by 5 points or less or something like that, or maybe even more than that. I probably have the numbers wrong. But again, I mean, Kansas State wins this game 70-66. Oklahoma State was up 60-54, I believe. So they outscored the Pokes in the last, I want to say 5-6 minutes, 16-6.
Yeah, I mean, look, we kind of, when we talked about K-State getting off to a 2-0 start in league play, and we were talking about the schedule, and they caught scheduling breaks playing UCF and then at West Virginia. I mean, all you have to look at is what's happened to Kansas. 2 games that we thought were kind of maybe gimmies for Kansas State that they won in blowout fashion, that Kansas lost to those 2 opponents, and both being on the road. And so, that just shows how hard it is to win in this league. It's so up and down. So, any game that you win, regardless of the opponent that you're playing in Big 12 play, is not something to take for granted. And so, yeah, Oklahoma State is now 0-5 in league play, but we thought they might come out hungry. It was kind of a tough situational spot for Kansas State, too. Look, Oklahoma State had gotten blown out multiple games in a row. You thought Mike Boynton would have them ready and geared up to play, and Kansas State was coming off an emotional victory against Baylor, and they had multiple guys really battling sickness, and that's well known as well. Look, they were putting ice packs, with John and I being at the game. I think it was 3 minutes in, John, they took Tyler Perry out of the game, and I looked over to you and I said, you see that? They're putting an ice pack on Tyler Perry's neck and a towel, and he looked really lethargic on the bench, and I knew then he must be battling something. And so he was beat up and under the weather. Multiple guys were under the weather, and they had to battle through and pull one out to get to 4-1 in league play. So yeah, you don't apologize for winning in that fashion. And look, you look at the final stat line. K-State shoots 52% from the floor. It's their third best offensive field goal percentage they put together this season. They shoot 36.4% from three. It ties for the third best performance from three this year. So offensively, they shot the ball well, particularly at the rim. I think that was a big part. They were 16 of 24 from the floor on points in the paint. Oklahoma State was 9 of 20 from the floor on shots in the paint. K-State outscores them 32-18 on points in the paint. They got the ball inside, and they capitalized. Second half, they got to the free throw line 13 times compared to only 3 attempts in the first half. They started pushing the ball inside more, and I thought that was a big key for Kansas State. So offensively, they were fine other than the turnovers. 17 turnovers. I think Jerome Tang would tell you that's too many. That's 3 straight games that they've turned it over 16 times or more. They're turning it over on around 25% of their offensive possessions last 3 games. They got to cut that number down to around 11 or 12. And obviously, we'll get into that in a few minutes. That's going to be really key against Iowa State and Ames, because that's what they thrive at, is turning you over. So ugly, maybe not the prettiest win, but Kansas State found a way to make plays at the end when it mattered.
And they figured out those turnovers late too, right? In the Baylor win, I think obviously turnovers were a problem there, but I think they turned it over only 2 times in the last 8 minutes. And then in the Oklahoma State win, you talked about the 17 turnovers. 12 of them were in the first half.
Yeah, I think they only had 5 or 6 in the second half, just like the Baylor game when I think they had 2 in the last 15 minutes plus overtime. So whatever they're doing then, do it earlier.
Yeah, do it earlier. And I thought that another key for in the Oklahoma State game was that both Cam Carter and Tyler Perry were going through some rough patches there, and they both figured it out enough late.
Yeah, and to me, I kept thinking, like, Oklahoma State is a team that I would not expect to play well if you can really get the crowd into it late in the game and you can put some pressure on them. And for so long, you just couldn't put any pressure on them. And that's credit to Oklahoma State. I do think a part of this is you got to give them credit for making shots. I mean, they were hitting some tough shots and just looked better. I kept saying to Cole, like, they just look better than we do right now. And some of that wasn't even necessarily what K-State was doing, but they were not allowing K-State to string anything together, for so long. There were all these moments where you're like, the crowd is like desperate to get into it. You want them to get into it. Excuse me. Getting choked up talking about how it finally happened. And you just couldn't get over the hump. And it was so frustrating. Like, dude, you got to make this happen at some point, because Oklahoma State, as much as we talk about how good K-State has been in games that are going down to the wire, Oklahoma State was 0-5 in games decided by 5 points or less coming into that. And they're pretty young. And so I just kept thinking, like, if you can get ahead, if you can get the go-ahead basket and then really get the crowd jumping, Oklahoma State is probably going to wilt. And they did. I mean, that's basically what happened. Now, I didn't necessarily have it as a Cam Carter banked 3 that was going to be the thing to put you over the top and really start putting the pressure on them, but I suppose I'll take it, on a day like that. And maybe that's a little bit of the kiss that you get from being at home in that game. But I felt like that was a big part of it. K-State is a team that has been, as frustrating as it was for a lot of the season to play those games against North Alabama, Oral Roberts, et cetera, that were very close. They've been through a lot of those fires, particularly at home. They have the confidence that they can figure it out, and they were able to figure it out. And Oklahoma State was a team that probably went into a little bit of like, here we go again, sort of a mode. They just have not been able to figure it out in close games like that.
And I know Arthur Kaluma was a stud, but there's something to be said for Cam Carter struggling as much as he is. Comes through with probably 2 of the bigger buckets at the end of the game. You talked about the 3 that was baked in. There was probably some good fortune there. But the lob on the inbounds with 1 second left, I mean, he hits that as well on a pretty good pass and finishes at the rim, one of those baskets at the rim that Cole alluded to. So I think there's something to be said for the way Cam Carter finished, since he'll tell you. I mean, he showed up to the post-game press conference and he was not really thrilled with the way he played.
It's funny because it did seem like Cam struggled a lot, and yet you look at the final box score, he's 5 of 9 from the floor, 3 of 7 from 3, and he has 15 points. Now he had the 4 turnovers, and they were all bad turnovers for him, and I'm sure that's what lingered with him.
And it felt like more.
It did. And yes. So, yeah, he makes that huge play on the inbound pass. Great pass by Tyler Perry, by the way, too. You got to put that right on the right spot under the basket to Cam, and he has got a smaller guy on him, and he goes up, puts it in, and then Cam buries the 2 free throws at the end of the game to seal it. And Arthur Kaluma, Kaluma, we can get into him more a little bit too if we want, but Him and Cam combined for 13 of K-State's final 14 points in the last 4 minutes and 30 seconds of that game. And Kaluma went 4-4 at the free throw line in the last 4:30. He had a go-ahead kind of fadeaway 10-footer in the lane as well. And then obviously Cam had the banked-in 3, the shot at the buzzer, and 2-2 at the free throw line in that last 4 minutes and 30 seconds. But Kaluma, man, it's the second time he's kind of put this K-State offense on his back this year. The Villanova game, he had 26. This one was the second most points. He scored 23 points, and he stuffed the stat line. He had 7 rebounds. He had 4 assists. He had 3 steals. He had 2 blocks. He was terrific from the floor, 7 of 12 from the floor, 3 of 5 from 3. And over his last 10 games, he's 22 of 44 from beyond the arc, 50%. He's really, really playing well. He's 10th in the league in scoring at 15.2 points per game. He's rebounding better than he ever has in his career. All of his stats across the board are career best. Shooting 41.1% from 3. The best he'd ever shot was 31% coming into this year. He's taken a huge leap in his game and was huge, obviously, for K-State in winning this one.
I think someone in our group chat, I don't know who it was, trying to chart where how much kids he trailed each time he made those 3 threes. I think it was by 6, 7, and 9, if I remember correctly. So the threes were timely. In addition to him and Cam, I think you said the final 14 points.
Yeah.
Kaluma had the final 11 in the first half by himself. Well.
Kaluma's, I charted Kaluma's threes. He hit one when they're down 30-23 to pull him within 4. He hit one to go into halftime on a design set play to put him back within 4. It was 35-28. He buried one. And then when it really felt like the game might be getting away, it was 50-41, and Kaluma steps up and hits a 3 to bring it 50-44. So big shots. Now, they eventually did fall behind by 10, I think at 54-44 with around 10 minutes left in the game. But they found a way to answer and respond. Tyler Perry had a couple big plays. He had a 3. He had a big and 1 as well. Credit to him for fighting through it, in the sickness, because I can just say when I'm sick, I'm a huge baby. So, I don't think I'd go out there and be able to play 30-plus minutes like some of these guys were able to do.
5 turnovers for Kaluma. Didn't feel like that many. 4 turnovers for Cam. Felt like he had a lot more. Weird how the game plays, right?
Yeah, and I think, I would echo the sentiments for Tyler Perry, and I think Dorian Finister, too. I think both of those guys were pretty close to not being able to go because they were sick. So they deserve a lot of credit for that. And, Tyler Perry also had quite a bit of tape around his hand and then his fingers, too. I think he's got some issues going on there that may linger a bit. We'll see. But he was really having to gut it out. He was having to gut it out quite a bit. So kudos to him because, Data Ames was not particularly good, again, when he was in the game. So, you think about that game without Tyler Perry, even though he did have his moments that were frustrating, too. But you gotta start giving that man some credit for the job that he is doing right now. Please give Home Field Apparel credit for making us all look awesome. Homefieldapparel.com is how you can get hooked up. 15% off your first order with promo code 3MA23. The best K-State gear around. The best gear for 100-plus schools out there across the country. Homefieldapparel.com is the place to find it. All the old school K-State logos, which is what is in vogue, in style right now, okay? So get to homefieldapparel.com. Great friends of ours that have helped supply us with the best-looking K-State threads out there. We're back in just a moment.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Yeah, Arthur Kaluma, we just did hit on him a little bit there, man, but he has turned into the guy, I feel like, for this team right now. Is that with Tyler Perry, especially, let's put it this way. We've kind of had this discussion before. I think it was the Patreon show that we did. And by the way, patreon.com/3MA to get signed up for that. We did a really fun Q&A episode last week where we took all of your questions. And I think that was one of them. Like, who of these guys are potential all Big 12 guys? And we were having the debate between Kaluma, Cam Carter, and Tyler Perry, and who would be all Big 12 guys. And I know it seemed like the sentiment from you guys was like, hey, Arthur Kaluma's numero uno right now, and it's starting to feel that way, especially with how Tyler Perry is having to do so much more. And I think that's a whole separate discussion that we've tried to have quite a bit here, that people probably need to recalibrate some of the expectations for him because he's having to do so much ball handling and basically be the point guard for the first time in his career. And that's not what his skill set at North Texas was, which was more of just a sniper who was going to go out and shoot the lights out. That hasn't been there as much, but he's fulfilling a role that this team desperately needs. And so that probably takes away from some of the lighted up scoring potential that he has. And I love Cam, but I think he's just been, it feels like a little bit more inconsistent. And Arthur Kaluma is the guy that is, as Cole just said, the timely shots. When K-State has really needed buckets and scoring, they're getting it right now from Kaluma. So is it fair to say we're kind of seeing a reshaping of all that where Kaluma's becoming the lead dog here?
Absolutely. And I think it's because, as you said, Perry's load and management is probably being spread out to other areas where it's not as conducive to the huge splash and scoring that we were accustomed to seeing from him in North Texas. For Cam Carter, the buckets of scoring are actually pretty there on a consistent basis. What his bugaboo is that'll probably hurt himself in terms of maybe reputation for like all Big 12 stuff is the inefficiency. He was efficient actually against Oklahoma State, going 5 of 9 from the field, but his 3-point shooting's a little bit down, although 3 of 7. Like Oklahoma State was one of his better games shooting the basketball because he struggled shooting the basketball for much of this year. But to his credit, he's still finding ways to score, and he's still the team's best perimeter defender. Arthur Kaluma is defending well. He's rebounding well. He's scoring well. He's shooting well. A little bit of an adventure at the free throw line every now and then, but there is no, besides his turnovers, when he tries to do a little too much, probably does the pump fake thing where he dribbles into traffic and gets himself into trouble. There's really no noticeable flaw in what he's doing right now because he is supplying a really well-rounded contribution across the board in terms of several stats. And you could tell he's getting comfortable in Manhattan, getting comfortable at Kansas State, getting comfortable in that locker room because of the ways, has been able to speak up lately in press conferences. So you just see everything rounding into form for him, and he's doing it at the most significant moments now. So everything that people thought he was going to be when he entered the transfer portal and what they probably Creighton might have thought they were getting from him in last year is starting to manifest itself right now in a Kansas State basketball uniform.
Well, that
I'll jump in here real quick. Yeah, Cole, I think I know where you're going with that, which is a good point to make on it. I would also just say for him getting more comfortable, DY, I wanted to hit on that. I think he was a guy that was really tight with Naquan Tomlin. I think the recruitment of Arthur Kaluma started in large part because they were working out together with pre-draft or, NBA draft stuff this past offseason. And he probably expected that to be a big part of not only just from a guy that was going to be a friend with him there, but also somebody that would help take pressure off of him. And they really sold the link that they could have with those two guys out there. And obviously that has gone away. And I think that's probably been an adjustment period, and things were tough and pretty tenuous for this team for a little while. And there was the one game where he basically got sapped by Jerome Tang, and Tang said he needed to buy in. I mean, I think it's fair to say there was a lot of stuff going on that was not particularly planned for him when he initially decided to come here to K-State. And so it's understandable that there was a little bit of a learning curve for that. And now he seems to be rounding into form there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, I think we've never asked Arthur Kaluma this, but I'm sure the Naquan Tomlin situation had an impact on him. I mean, he's talked about how Naquan recruited him to Kansas State publicly in the past, and they were working out at NBA workouts together. And largely the reason he came here is because Naquan sold him on coming to Kansas State. And so, when that situation unfolded, that could contribute to perhaps maybe a little early struggles and adjustment and just learning a whole new system and a whole new coaching staff as well for Kaluma. The one thing I was going to say about his, actual game, that pump fake's going to continue to become more and more effective that he does from three, because he's shooting at 50% from three, and he's shooting enough attempts from out there that teams have to respect it. I mean, he's 44 attempts in the last 10 games, so almost 5 attempts a game, around 4.5 per game from three. And he's making them at a 50% clip, which is going to enable his ability to blow past his defenders and get to the rim more, which we know he's really good at as well. And he's strong at finishing. So his game is really evolving. And, she's shooting a career best, nearly 5 free throw attempts per game. He's shooting 76% from the foul line on the year. And I think he can probably even get to the foul line even more now as he continues to drive more. So the one thing I'll say, and I said it on the last one, is I just think he needs to look to shoot more. He's got to be a little bit more assertive. There's something to be said about letting the game come to you, and I completely can agree with that. But in 5 of the last 10 games, he's under double-digit field goal attempts each game. So I think he's got to be a guy that's shooting the ball 13, 14 times a game for this team to be really good.
Yeah, and, he is really turning into a really good defender as well. So I don't want anyone to lose sight of that. Talk about guys that score, shoot. I mean, I was surprised to hear this. I mean, Kansas State's 7-0 when Will McNair scores 10 or more points. But so that's another interesting stat. Maybe more coincidence than anything could be. I do think Arthur Kaluma needs to shoot more, and I think he's starting to understand that. But he's top 12 in the Big 12 in scoring right now. And of those 12 guys, he's shooting the best from the three-point line.
Do you think that it feels like they make it a point of emphasis to get the ball into McNair to start the game? Have you noticed that?
I think it's probably to test teams because, look, if there's one place where if Kansas State's right, they can take advantage of, it's inside because teams are going to worry about this guy and they're going to worry about that guy. And there was for a moment, and Jerome Tang said in his post game, said, for a while I was upset we weren't getting him the ball more because they just weren't guarding him.
Yeah. I think it's very noticeable that they do try to go to that. And honestly, it kind of it makes sense from that standpoint to me that they would have success if he is able to get in there and just, to me, maybe this isn't fair. It feels like that's kind of stealing some points. If you're getting Will McNair to get 10 points, that feels in a way like stealing some easy baskets and taking some of the pressure off the guys that we talk about who are going to be playing more on the perimeter and having to rely on them for all of your points. If you can get double digits from a guy like McNair, it's going to be a huge lift. And Cole, I think you make such a great point on Kaluma. Like, Oklahoma State was the game where it really stood out to me where I was like, dude, his pump fake is so much more effective because they were flying at him. Oklahoma State was flying out to him at the three-point line. And so many times early in the year, we got frustrated with the, kind of like, Kaluma's got the one move. I think I made the joke, it was like knocked up when you've got Seth Rogen out there and they're like, he's doing the dice thing too much. That's all he's got. It felt like Arthur Kaluma's one move was to pump fake and get into the lane, but it wasn't working well. He was having a hard time getting by guys because there wasn't as much respect for his three. I think that's there now, and that's obviously on the scouting report. And so he's having more success with it and going to have more success with it, which bodes well.
Yeah, well, what else bodes well? You're heading into this Iowa State game. It's pretty important. You got 2 road games coming up with Iowa State and Houston. One is probably the more tougher atmosphere to play in front of. Obviously, that's Hilton Coliseum in Ames. I don't think anyone thinks the Fertitta Center in Houston is a house ablaze, but Houston is by far the better team. So I don't know which. Iowa State's probably the more gettable game. You're just doing it in a lot more tougher circumstances. But what I do like is because it's a Wednesday game, you just played on Saturday, you kind of get that extra day. And this is a team that's not very deep right now and it's been not allocating minutes across the board a whole lot this season, but you get that extra day because it's a Wednesday game rather than Tuesday. It's even Wednesday night at 8:00, right? David Gasson, because of foul trouble, only played 24 minutes. Will McNair, for the second game in a row, played less than 30 minutes. Tyler Perry, even though it was because of an illness, played the fewest minutes he has in some time at 30. So you might feel, for some of your guys, a little fresher than you normally would.
Yeah, so long as they can get that sickness out of the locker room. Hopefully that gives them enough time for Perry and them to get healthy and no one else gets it if they haven't already have it.
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion, DY, coming up with this week because this is definitely to me, sort of a house money week. But speaking of money, if you want a lot of house money, you can head on over to our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL playoffs. They're bringing you an offer that'll help make the playoffs electrifying, as if it wasn't electrifying enough after another Chiefs win. Take that, Buffalo. New customers can bet $5 on any games and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code KCSN. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code KCSN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario, Canada's up there, right? Are they close? Would they be Buffalo fans up there? It's a tough day. I listened to a little bit of Buffalo sports radio on my way back from the gym this morning. They're pretty bummed. They're pretty upset. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. That's random. See dkng.com/football for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gambling resources. Iowa State, man. Yeah, Derek, you make a really particularly good point, I think, on that. Like they need this is a perfect time to not be playing on Tuesday. It's a perfect time to be playing on Wednesday. They need to get guys a little bit of extra rest, and hopefully this is a nice little break for them after pulling 2 games out of the fire in some ways this past week. But I don't know. Look, Iowa State, I would have said before Saturday, like I felt pretty good about K-State's chances to go in there and certainly have a chance to win down the stretch, especially because Iowa State has been playing without Lipsey. But then, I mean, they went in, had to hang on for dear life, but they were smacking TCU around on Saturday without him. And literally just held on by the skin of their teeth. TCU had a couple shots go in and out where they came furiously back from, was it 19 down? Was that the high water mark for Iowa State? So I guess I don't really totally know what to think about it after that. But I think the thing with Iowa State is my stereotype with them is that they're going to play much the same way at K-State. They want to rely on defense. They're not going to be a particularly high-scoring outfit, and that's probably going to lend itself toward you having a chance to be in this game. Whereas Houston, now I know they're really good defensively too, but they feel like they've got a little bit more firepower to me, where they like that's the type of game where if you catch them on a night where they're hot, that could get much more out of hand.
Yeah, blindly, I could see that. But if you look at what Houston's done in the last 3-4 games, I mean, they're struggling to score. They won 2 games in a row without scoring 60, I believe. So they scored 50. They beat UCF 57-42. So they're really playing suffocating basketball, having trouble scoring. I mean, teams in this league are going to go through slumps, and at least offensively, Houston's going through an offensive slump that's pretty steep at the moment. Now they do play a little bit of a slower pace that is conducive to some of these numbers, but Iowa State's got a couple of guys who can really light up from the 3-point line, and that's a little troublesome. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think it's too stereotypical the way that it has folded, because I don't know that Houston is significantly better on the offensive end yet than Iowa State so far this year. Maybe in moments, but especially not recently. And I guess I'm not going to overreact or make grand sweeping conclusions from what Iowa State did in Fort Worth, because if you go back and look at the last couple of years, for some reason, TJ Otzelberger just has TCU's number both home and away.
Yeah. It's 2 opponents that can attack a singular weakness for Kansas State. Houston, an elite offensive rebounding team under Kelvin Sampson year in and year out. K-State's not been a good defensive rebounding team the last couple of years. Obviously been terrific defensively, just got to capitalize and get the board. Iowa State, elite at turning teams over, and Kansas State is 338th in the country in turnovers per possession at over 20%. This year, I mentioned it earlier, they're over 25% in their last 3 games in turning the basketball over, and so it's going to be critical that Kansas State takes care of the ball in this game. Look, K-State has won in Hilton Coliseum 4 out of the last 6 times. You go back to 2017, K-State is 4-2 in Ames.
Good.
Yeah. So there were some this kind of performances you didn't maybe expect. K-State went up there and won like 91-75 one year. I think Dean Wade lit them up in one game.
I was going to say some of those teams from Kansas State aren't even that good, but some of those teams from Iowa State are not that good either. So.
Yeah. Look, Iowa State, an elite defensive team. They're the number 3 defense in Ken Palm currently on the season. They ranked 8th defensively last year and 5th nationally in TJ Otzelberger's first season in the 2021-2022 season. So they've been top 10 in Ken Palm defense each of the last 3 years under Otzelberger. They forced TCU into 27 turnovers, the most in Jamie Dixon's 8 seasons at TCU. That led to 36 points off turnovers for Iowa State. They're 3rd in the country, forcing turnovers on just under 26% of their opponents' possessions. They ranked 3rd last year at that same category at 24.4%. and they ranked 6th nationally in 2021-22 at 24%. They're number 1 in the country in steals per possession at 16.1%. They've forced 20-plus turnovers in 6 games this season and 15 or more turnovers in 15 of their 19 games. They're 9th in the country, holding teams to 39.3% from the floor. K-State is 14th at 39.6%. So 2 really good defensive teams. K-State's 23rd in KenPom defense. Iowa State 161st at 3-point defense at 33.2%. As an offense, they turn it over on 15.2% of their possessions. That ranks 68th. And I mentioned it earlier, K-State 338th nationally at 20.5% turnovers per possession offensively. So they got to take care of the basketball in this game. One thing that did surprise me, guys, Iowa State's 19th nationally, shooting nearly 49% from the floor. So I did not expect that. They're 133rd in the country at 3-point offense at 34.7%. And over their last 5 games, they're 18 of 81 from 3. That's only 22%.
Yeah, I busted out KenPom here just to accentuate the points. I mean, we've talked a lot about the defenses here. Houston is the number 1 defensive efficiency team in the country, according to KenPom. Iowa State is number 3. So Iowa State's got the 53rd adjusted efficiency offense in the country. Houston is 18th. So Houston is a little bit better there. But I mean, look, Houston's number 1 in the country in KenPom. So they are damn good. They are damn good. The turnovers are going to have to be cut down this week if K-State's going to have a chance to win one of these games, no doubt.
Yeah, I think Iowa State's the gettable game just because I think they're less talented, and some of their numbers I think are propped up from playing a very pillar-soft non-conference schedule that is probably due for a little bit of regression. If anything, just because of the way they played in the last week and a half, especially on the offensive end, which has dragged, I think they were top 5 in offense at one point. Now, like John said, they're down to 18, or I believe you just said. So their offense is taking a hit. They're probably due for a big offensive game. And I do, like, there's a little bit of worry here, right, that their get-right games on offense are coming up, and one of the opponents is Kansas State.
Yeah. Look, at K-State went into Ames last year. They had a real opportunity to knock off the Cyclones. I think they led late in the game. They ended up losing 80-76, but I think it's a game that you could steal potentially, and I think it actually helps that they won at TCU. They're 3-2 in the league now. Look, it'll be a tough place to play, a really difficult atmosphere. I think a lot of it will be dependent upon can Tamin Lipsey give it a go. He had a sprained shoulder. He missed the game against TCU. So you say to yourself, like, how did they get up by 19 plus against TCU and force that many turnovers without their leading scorer, leading assist man? Tamin Lipsey, the sophomore point guard, over 14 points per game, over 5 assists per game, 5+ rebounds as well. Really, they're do-it-all guy. And the one thing I would say, and I said this about Iowa State last year, and they've done a nice job of taking care of the basketball this year, especially with Lipsey on the floor. But late in that game, TCU started to ramp up the pressure. You start pressing Iowa State. You start pressuring them defensively, and they will turn the ball over. If they do not have Tamin Lipsey, and K-State has to be careful with this because of minutes, battling sickness, et cetera. We'll see how healthy they are. I would try to pressure Iowa State at times. That's what flipped the game in Manhattan last year. They started pressuring them when K-State was down. They turned them over some. You can turn over this Iowa State team, especially if they don't have Lipsey. That's what I would like to see K-State do, is crank up the pressure and try to force some points in transition, because it's really hard to score against Iowa State in your half-court set offense. If you can get out and run, that's going to really help you.
The numbers be damned. Maybe I'm just a hater. I don't think Iowa State is significantly better than Texas Tech or that much different, and Kansas State should have won in Lubbock.
I think that's a pretty good way to put it. Now, Iowa State has also beaten Houston in Ames. So, I mean, they have that type of performance in them. But this thing that strikes me, I'm looking at their profile. Dude, TJ Otzelberger really did a nice job with that schedule, because they're 14th in KenPom. And I mean, look, they beat 214, 352, 299, 281, 98, 279, 45, the one fairly nice win they have in the non-con, Iowa, but then 298, 343, 314, 207. I mean, like, that's their non-con, like the wins that they had there, and they're just blasting these teams. I mean, which is, it's dumb that that's being rewarded, but Otzelberger knows the rules, and they played the game pretty well, I would say.
They did. That's why I said some of their numbers I think are inflated.
Yeah, it's definitely, they just beat the hell out of bad teams and inflated their numbers. And then, that also helps them in the net rankings. I mean, they only have they're number 10 in the NCAA net rankings, yet they only have between quad 1 and quad 2, 4 quad 1 and 2 wins combined, but yet they're 10th in the net because their efficiency metrics are so high. So yeah, they blew the door off some teams and that helped them.
Yeah, and then you think about K-State's non-con where it was all the overtime games and just squeaking past the Chicago States of the world. I mean, it's really kind of the difference there. Any other thoughts on basketball to close out that discussion?
You're right. I was going to respond there. You're right about Iowa State having to win over Houston at home and Ames, but in that way, they're kind of like Kansas State where they're a threat to go 9-0 at home in the conference. So they're good. They're that good at home.
Yeah. Just if you can go 1-1 this week, you take that in a heartbeat and you feel really good. So
I think to get where they want to get, and I'm talking about the high end, grabbing one of these is probably almost a requirement. Now, I know you can just get some late, but to continue to feel better about yourself, to continue to compete for a Big 12 championship, right? I think the requirement here is one. If you lose both, then you're probably reverting back to a little bit of take care of everything at home, and you're probably on the right side of the boat.
Okay, well, my follow-up question to that was going to be, what are we talking about here on the high end of what they want to compete for? Because are we viewing that as a realistic discussion to even be having? I mean, I understand that they're one of two teams, right? Just them and Texas Tech right now that are 4-1 in the Big 12, and everything else is a jumbled mess of teams that are like 2-3 or 3-2.
Correct.
But it's still, I mean, I don't want to discount them, and I don't want this to be like I'm trying to talk down to them or anything at all. They've earned this, and the point about Kansas is perfect. Kansas just lost to UCF in West Virginia. K-State blasted both of those teams, and they're 4-1 and a game ahead of them in the standings. But I still feel like we see the warts that this team has and think that that'll be a tall task to be legitimately competitive in that throughout the rest of the year. But it's I guess, a fair discussion point to bring up. How much are we buying into that now with how much of a jumbled mess the rest of the league is? Like, it's been crazy for everybody out there.
Well, they're sitting there at 4-1 in the Big 12 right now. If they were to split the next two games, and you're talking about another huge road win, I would be look. I don't like if you hook me up to a lie detector test right now and says this team talented enough and playing well enough to compete for a Big 12 championship, I would say no. Right? If you hook me up to a lie detector test, I think this team is trending in the right direction, but that's probably a step too far in my mind. But if they split the next two games, you're talking about either winning at Iowa State or at Houston, and you're telling me they're 5-2 in the Big 12, probably still in first, and have already 2 road wins, then I'd be hard-pressed to say they might not hang around a little bit.
Yeah. I think Ken Palm has them, projected to finish 9-9 in the league as of today?
Yeah.
Yes, but also Ken Palm also, and so some of this you got to understand, like, you're playing probabilities here. If you go look at it, it's really jarring because they only have 2 games predicted as wins the rest of the way, which would be Oklahoma State on the road and West Virginia at home. But there are so many of these that are like 46%, 42%, 48%, that are pretty close there.
And the reason why I said what I say, and I don't know if Cole he might share this belief, is if you're 5-2 with 2 road wins already, look, maybe I got my head in the sand. I can't say it's winning at least 7 or 8 in the Big 12 at home.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think they're really good at home. I would think they'll win at least 7 of the 9 league games at home. And if you get 2 on the road, then I feel comfortable, thinking this team's going to win at least 9 league games. They might steal another 1 or 2 on the road. Look, I'm sure Jerome Tang in that locker room, they're thinking, why not us? Why can we not compete for a Big 12 championship? They're not saying, like, we can talk and be like, hey, get to 9-9, go, win 5 more league games, and you're probably going to the NCAA tournament, and that's an accomplishment with all the adversity that this team's dealt with. But I know the people in that locker room and the coaches, they're not thinking that way. Us as fans can think that way, but, hopefully they exceed all of the expectations that us on the outside potentially have, and they continue to excel and thrive. And if you can steal one this week, that would be huge. It'd be a quad 1 win that would obviously stick for the whole year easily. Really lift your resume up and be significant for this team. And that West Virginia game, guys, I mean, I think I said to you after they beat Texas in Morgantown, like, West Virginia, that win is going to look better and better as the year goes on. because they're going to get Jesse Edwards back probably in the next week. And once they get the talented center back from Syracuse, I think that's going to be a team that can win 7 or so league games. And they may sneak into quad 2 win territory for K-State. They're 154th in the net as of today. They have to get into the top 135 for K-State to get a quad 2 win out of that because it was on the road. And there's a very good possibility, I think, that they can do that. When they beat KU, they jump from 167 to 154 in the net. So you knock off a couple upsets, you're probably going to jump into that top 135. And I hope the best for Josh Eilert and that team and that program, obviously not winning in Manhattan when they play in a month or so, but hopefully they continue to have some success and make that win look better.
Villanova came close to beating UConn over the weekend, fell a little bit short, didn't help them at all in the net, stayed 38.
So where are we at then with quad 1 wins right now? Is there anything outside of Baylor
that they have? No, Baylor's the only one that won, but I mean, I think they have 9 or 10 left.
Yeah,
What's
I mean,
our friends at Providence doing right now?
Speaking of blowing out opponents, John, Providence beat the doors off of DePaul the other night, which was, I think DePaul was 291st in the net, but because they beat them 162 on the road, they moved from 67 to like 54 in the net. Now they sit today at 58 in the net. They got to get in the top 50 to be a quad 1 win. So they got to move up 8 more spots this year. Villanova was right there on the cusp of becoming a quad 1, and they lost by 1 at home to number 1 UConn on Saturday night. So the officials called 2 hook charges in the last minute on Villanova on Eric Dixon, questionable.
Second their name. Give me names.
Driscoll, Pat Driscoll. So
I knew it. I knew it. Never heard that name before in my life, but Cole has it down.
I didn't have all the names of the officials on Saturday in Manhattan, man. I didn't recognize one of those guys that was doing the game. Darren George and Marcus Pettigrew, I believe, were the other 2, but I didn't recognize the third guy. So,
by the way, USC is 8-11 on the record this year. Just not a good team at this point, but somehow it's still 90 in the net.
Yeah, I guess I should amend my statement from earlier at the very beginning when I said, avoiding having the one bad loss on the schedule. I guess USC is definitely there.
They still don't have a bad loss. They're 9-0 in the quad 3 and quad 4.
Yeah, and it's a quad 2 loss. It's not necessarily bad, even though they're 8-11. Miami is a team you thought would be better too. They're 64 in the net. They keep losing ACC games. That's not good for them. Hopefully LSU can kind of rise up a little bit. They're at 92.
But how close is USC to slipping?
Not very.
Okay. So we don't have much to worry about there. All right.
Because it was on the neutral floor and they're in the top 100 already for some reason. I don't know if they should.
I see. I'm shocked. That's why I'm shocked that they're in the top 100. I'm shocked to hear that, but I don't know. Bronny James bump, I guess. Cole, I feel like you could be, Ken Palm's just a dude. Ken Pomeroy, right? Came from relative obscurity to have one of the biggest basketball sites around. I feel like if you started an officials website, you could become that guy for basketball officiating, and we could all be talking about it and referencing it, and you would be the man to do it.
I knew you were going there. There actually used to be a website that I tracked back when I was in college called statsheet.com. I don't believe it exists anymore, but you could track every college basketball official in the country, and you damn well bet I did. So, you could track their trends, the foul trends, how many technicals they call as an individual, etc. Like fouls per game and games that they officiate. It's, it had all the things. How many games? I think I wrote a column one time because some of these guys were going and officiating over 100 games, and they were doing 6 to 7 games a week. And I wrote a story about how, some of these guys are older in age, and there is no way they could be at the top of their game traveling night in and night out throughout the country and officiating and trying to keep up with the pace of these games. And so, I ripped into them pretty good. These guys make good money. That's why I'm not afraid to call out college basketball officials. They're overpaid.
BYU, despite losing to Texas Tech and losing a huge lead on the road to Texas Tech, the Red Raiders apparently played better from behind this year. BYU's still top 5 in the net.
DY, why are you steering the conversation away from officials?
Yeah, I was like, wait, DY just completely uninterested in your
we're trying. Yeah, we're trying to. What should we call it, John?
I just think coldpalm.com.
I think it needs to have like something to do with the officials, but wow, I'll think about it.
We'll have to workshop that, at Cole_Manbeck on Twitter. If you have any ideas for that, you can send them to the Discord on Patreon as well. If you want to join our Patreon, it's patreon.com/3ma. $5 a month. You can get the Discord with inside info there. Just be able to interact with us on a regular basis, like a giant group chat. Plus live shows every single week. We give you some extra audio content there also. So make sure that you get signed up at patreon.com/3ma. Do we want to slip in just a little Dante Cephas is official? He finally announced that he's here. K-State gets a wide receiver transfer. I know we've already talked about Cephas quite a bit, but Penn State transfer, who initially was at Kent State with Matthew Middleton, will be a boost to the receiver corps, should at least alleviate some people's concerns about what was going on there, I would think.
Yeah, last UCLA and Pittsburgh for him, I think it's been a done deal for at least a few weeks. And I didn't have really any concerns that this was going to unfold in a positive manner for Kansas State. And I know he didn't achieve what he wanted at Penn State probably, but he was still their number 2 leading receiver. It just shows you how it could have been a product of how poorly that offense was constructed and how it went under Drew Allar. They fired their offensive coordinator. The 2 prior years, I mean, he's lighting it up for almost 2,000 yards, maybe over 2,000 yards for who will be his Kansas State receivers coach this upcoming season. And one of those he did with Tez Walker, right? So both those he did with Tez Walker. The first one, he was much better than Tez Walker. So I don't think he's a product of just Tez Walker becoming a huge name on the scene at Kent State either. So I realize that some people want this group of 5, Power 5 receiver. It's got 1,000 yards in the year before and is an all Big 12 player or an all conference player. But, sometimes it doesn't work out that way, and this is probably the next best thing. And it's still a guy that I think in a better situation would have had a lot better numbers last year.
Think how excited DY Kansas State fans would have been to get a guy like Dante Cephas last year when he was ranked as the number 15 overall player in the transfer portal out of over 1,000 guys, according to the On3 industry ranking consensus, and was coming off 2 years where he had nearly 2,000 yards combined receiving and 12 touchdowns. And so that 1 year at Penn State, people see the stat line, they see some of the struggles. First of all, I think a big thing there was, guys, he didn't arrive at Penn State until after spring ball. I believe he came in the summer, had to pick up a whole new system, and Drew Aller and that offense under Mike Yursich was a mess. There's a reason they fired their offensive coordinator during the middle of the season, and they went all in on Andy Koldenecki, the KUOC, to go get him this offseason. And so I wouldn't take a lot from the Penn State numbers because their downfield passing attack was a disaster. I mean, Cephas was 5th on the team in receiving yards, but he was number 2 among wide receivers in receiving yards. They did not have the ability to stretch the field. It was poorly planned, and Aller was not great. A lot of checkdowns, a lot of shorter throws. So the thing I would say about it is Matthew Middleton knows him well. He knows what he's getting in Dante Cephas, had him for his 2 best seasons. I wouldn't focus too much on the Penn State numbers. I think he'll be fine at Kansas State. They'll know, and he'll be here for spring ball because he's already on campus. So that's going to be a huge help for him.
Penn State's been like an elephant graveyard for good offense here recently. So yeah, I'm not going to put a ton of stock into that. I'm happy for it. I'm excited for it. You throw him in, obviously, with Jace Brown, Keegan Johnson, Jaden Jackson. Even if you want to go to Garrett Oakley at tight end, and then DJ Giddens at running back, there are going to be quite a few skill position weapons out there at the disposal of Avery Johnson and company this year. It's going to do it for us. As always, thank you to our friends at Holiday Distillery, our friends at DraftKings, our friends at Home Field Apparel. We appreciate the work of Nick Springer behind the scenes. For Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, I'm John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to another edition of 3 Ball.